对于绝大多数有投资行为的人来说呢，最熟悉的实体资产就是地产了。之前呢，我也出过一期影片哈，专门给大家讲了一下我自己在商业地产的一级市场里面所经历的、看见的这个市场，在前几年呢是怎么样起高楼，又是怎么样快速的垮掉的。那这一期呢，咱们就来讲一讲另外一个地产类别——住宅市场，也就是大家说的这个 residential market。那这个市场现在呢是处在这个周期里面的什么阶段？那面临着什么样的困难？未来呢又很可能会发生一点什么？今天的这个助攻，有些朋友可能就又认识了。
The overall macro trend is housing shortage. Do not be fooled.
Jason Hartman， 他在住宅地产这个市场里面可以说是很成熟的地产商和投资人了，欢迎大家去谷歌他一下哈。另外呢，我4月5号会在尔湾，4月6号会在旧金山，分别找个地方跟订阅我频道的观众们线下聚一下。那如果你正好在这区域呢，欢迎用我这个描述栏里面的链接预约一下见面的名额哈。我的团队成员会跟你取得联系，确认一下。那如果大家想线下见到 Jason 的话呢，4月4号到4月6号，他会在加州的这个尔湾专门给地产投资人办一场活动。那订票的链接呢就在描述栏里面哈，希望在现场可以看到大家。
We've got Empowered Investor Live coming up. We've got Joy will be there. I will be there. Michael Maloney, Sharon Lecter, Tom Wheelwright. It's going to be a great event, so join us for that.
对，因为我也会在活动上面闪现一下。这期文字稿大家可以在这个描述栏里面找到哈，欢迎点进去看。我们先通过如今我们掌握的一些信息，宏观的展望一下美国住宅市场在未来至少1年之内的动向。
I know you do a lot of turnkey, so you're close to residential. So what do you see the market going at this moment?
Joy, I would say this is one of the most difficult markets ever to predict. As you know, because you follow my work and my podcast and YouTube channel, and I make predictions all the time, and they pretty much come true. However, right now, with the new Trump administration, we are in a very chaotic, volatile time where there are just many, many question marks relating to many things, and I would say especially tariffs. Tariffs are a very big issue, and I think they are going to have a significant impact on housing prices, and it's good and bad. You know, there are positives and negatives, pros and cons of this, but this is one of the hardest markets to predict because there are just a lot of question marks. That said, I will say I think that unless something extraordinary happens, if we get big reduction in mortgage rates or anything else, I would say this market is going to be sort of a kind of a fairly stable market with very minor appreciation this year. If I had to put a number on that nationally, of course, all markets are different. There are almost 400 metropolitan areas in the US. There are 3,100 counties in the US. There are over 9,000 cities in the US. It's a big country, so all real estate is local. However, if you're going to take that nationally, I would say that we could probably expect about 4%, just modest appreciation this year.
Can you elaborate on why tariff can make a big impact in residential?
Yeah, so the Trump administration has threatened tariffs many times on imported goods. And if you think of the ingredients of a house, and if you are a home builder that really depends on stable prices for all of your inputs, all of your ingredients, to that house, whether it be lumber, copper wire, petroleum products, concrete, glass, steel, doorknobs, hinges, cabinets, appliances. There are so many ingredients that go into the construction of a home. And many of these inputs are under extreme pressure and question marks in terms of tariffs. So if these input costs increase by 25%, well, then the price of the home can't do anything else but get more expensive because the builder is not going to take that out of their profit margin. And their profit margin isn't that high anyway in most cases. So we are going to see a much more expensive newly constructed home. And when we see more expensive newly constructed homes, that means that the resale market follows. So even if it's not a new built home, we see upward price pressure in the existing homes as well. Also, this leads to upward rent prices as well. So my 4% number that I just gave you may be much, much higher. So if you're a real estate owner, you love this. This is great news for you. These tariffs are actually good news for you. But if you are a real estate buyer, it is not good news for you, and you should act now before we see the effects of these tariffs.
And then how about the immigration part? Because the immigration has been kind of limited a little bit after Trump got into the office. What do you think?
I think it's hugely significant. I mean, look, illegal immigrants are not renting the types of houses that our clients own. They are renting lower end properties for sure. So if you're a landlord and you own, say, a Class C or a Class D apartment complex, and your tenants are being deported, that is going to have an impact on you. It's going to lessen your occupancy rates and increase your vacancy rates. Like I said, there is going to be pain along the way with these changes in policies. However, long term, I think they are very good for the country, and I think Trump is doing the right thing in most cases.
这儿我也简单的提一下地产这些分级哈。那在美国的这个地产里面呢，那根据年份不一样，会被分为不同的等级，就是 Class A、B、C、D 这些。那 Class A 呢就是最新的，那 Class D 呢就是最老的。那我们会很自然的想到哈，像这个 Class A 的这个地产，它虽然说市场价格呢相对来讲比较高一些，但是呢，由于比较新，维护成本呢相对也会比较小一点，那房客的这个整体收入水平呢相对会高一些。而这个 Class B、C、D 的这个维护成本呢相对就比较高一点，这房客整体收入水平相对也低一点。那这些都是投资人在投这些地产的时候需要考虑到的一些因素哈。那因为这些最终都是跟现金流有关嘛。当然这里面也不是说 Class B、C、D 的这些地产它就不好哈，只是说不同的这个市场周期和宏观趋势会影响到不同等级的地产。那而且这个地产是一个区域性其实非常强的资产哈，这个具体案例呢咱就要具体分析了。
The past couple of years, the Class A apartment buildings have been hit the hardest because there have been so many new ones delivered into the market. I mean, last year we had a record number of new apartments delivered into the market, okay? And those were all Class A because new is Class A, okay? That's the definition basically. Nobody's allowed to build a cheap Class C new property anymore, and that hasn't been that way for decades. So all of the new construction is Class A. And so a lot of those have been delivered. That market has suffered greatly. It is, I think, at kind of the bottom now, or bouncing around the bottom, and it is in recovery because now it has come the other way, and the construction of Class A apartments has declined massively. Okay, but all the stuff that started a few years ago was delivered, and there's a little bit more to be delivered. But overall, I think that market is, nearing its recovery mode.
And also about the inventory. I know for the past few years, because the interest rate used to be super low, so everybody got their house and refinanced or whatever. So now the inventory became a big problem in the past few years. So how about the inventory now? Is it going up or down? What is the trend there?
那任何一个市场，任何一个周期里面，能够影响市场的最根本的因素就是供需关系。那所以我们不管是在商业地产领域，还是在住宅市场领域，都会非常关注市场上的供给有多少，也就是 inventory。这里面我也想多说一句哈，就我和我的团队在跟观众单独沟通的过程中呢，在讨论到市场走向的时候，发现很多朋友常常都是在了解市场里面的需求是有多少。那当然了，这个其实也非常重要哈，而且呢，这个思路也很自然，因为我们在生活中绝大多数的时候都是扮演这个需求方这个角色的。那甚至在买股票的时候呢，大多数人都是站在消费者或者需求者的这个视角来做出投资行为的。但是我所在这个一级市场里面，我跟周围的朋友们在思考投资或者市场周期的时候呢，我们会把相同甚至更多的精力放在观察市场的这个供给上面。大家可以这么想哈，在一级市场里面呢，收购或者投资的是一个商业的项目哈。套在地产领域呢，就是在给地产租赁领域提供供给。比如说咱就从这个地产项目开发的角度上来说哈，那至少需要看到未来3到5年的这个市场供给嘛，因为建一个地产项目至少需要的时间是以年来计算的。那在这个项目完工的时候呢，根据开发商所设定的这个目标不一样哈，也就是说这房子建出来是用来卖的还用来租的，那开发商需要考虑在这个项目完工的这个时间点，租房或者是购房市场里面哈会出现多少供给。 那因为这些供给的来源都是开发商的竞争对手嘛，需求不变的情况下，竞争对手越少，供给端的这个话语权就越强嘛。所以作为投资人，投资的时候投的就是生产商品或者服务的那一端，那观察市场的供给这一端的变化呢，就格外的重要。
Inventory is about 23% higher than it was last year at this time, but it is still historically very low. So depending on the stats you're using, because they do vary, whereas some inventory statistics in terms of how many homes are for sale include pending sales and contingent sales, and some statistics only include active listings. Those are the ones that I prefer. And in terms of actual active listings that you can buy today, a house that's on the market that you can buy today, give or take, there's about 650,000 homes for sale in the country. And that is out of about 140 million housing units. So less than 0.5% of the inventory is for sale. That's incredibly low. Usually, there's about 1% of the inventory for sale to be in what we would call a normal market. Now, that's not a buyer's market, it's not a bad market, it's not a down market, it's just a normal market, would have about double the inventory we have now. I am loading on the screen here a chart that basically shows the inventory levels, okay? So we do have higher inventory than we had before, and these are different years from 2015, 16 onward to 2025. And we can see where we are right now in 2025. Inventory is 28% higher than it was last year on this month, but it is 21.4% lower than it was in 2019 before COVID. So inventory is historically low. Just to be normal, it would have to double from where it is now. And that would only be normal. That would not be negative. It would not be a bad market. It would not be a recessionary market. It would just be a normal market. So we are half of normal right now.
So you do still expect that this kind of below the normal inventory can last a few years? Because I mean, like especially with the low interest rate people already getting on their house, like who's going to give it up easily?
That's known as the mortgage lock-in effect. And what you're saying is absolutely right, because about 25% of the people in the country have a mortgage at or below 3%.
Ooh.
About 65% of the country has a mortgage at or below 4%. And about 80 to 85% of the country has a mortgage at or below 5%. So they all have very reasonable mortgages, very comfortable payments that they're not willing to give up, because, Joy, what they've realized is the mortgage is an asset. It's an irreplaceable asset. You can no longer get money that cheap,
right,
as you could back then during the COVID era. So people are just not willing to sell their homes because their mortgage deal is so good. And here's what I didn't mention there. This is also important, very important. About 40% of the country has no mortgage at all.
Oh.
Okay? So the one thing I've always said, and this is why all of the doomers that predicted a real estate crash were wrong, and they will continue to be wrong, okay? I mean, barring extraordinary circumstances of some sort that we, don't see in the future. They believed that people would rush to put their homes up for sale. And they only looked at the way a new buyer enters the market with a much higher mortgage payment and a much higher house price. But what they didn't look at is the 132 million people that already own a house with an incredibly cheap mortgage or no mortgage at all. And they also bought those properties at lower prices than we have today. So, as I always say, if you want to have a real estate crash, there is one absolutely necessary ingredient you must have, this one ingredient. And that is, you must have millions or tens of millions of distressed homeowners that become distressed home sellers. Right now, we have the opposite of that. There's almost no delinquency in mortgages to speak of. I'll show you another chart here. It's just mind-boggling. It shows you how stable the current owners of real estate are in this country. It's just mind-boggling how good things are for them. This chart is showing you foreclosure activities for each quarter dating back over 20 years. So in 2003, basically, we saw foreclosures at about 200,000. During the Great Recession, 2007, 2008, almost 600,000. And then it just kept going down, 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 down. And then during the COVID era, there was almost no foreclosure activity. I blew this part of the chart up over here, okay? So you see how this activity was almost nothing. It was like non-existent. And now, because the moratoriums no longer exist, the foreclosure moratoriums, that has gone up a little bit, but still it's lower than it was in 2019. It's lower than it was in early 2020. So the foreclosure activity is almost nothing. There's like no distress in the market. It's literally, if you just take out the COVID era, it's the lowest amount of foreclosure activity in 21 years. So where's the distress? You've got to have distress. Here's another chart that's interesting.
What you're saying is the residential part. It's not anything about commercial.
No, commercial is much different. Right. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, okay? Because people can sometimes get mixed up with like commercial real estate and the residential. That's two different markets.
Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, I play in the residential side of the market most of the time. I mean, we do a little bit of commercial property here and there, but it's really residential. It's my main business.
Right.
And so I am speaking about residential real estate.
Right.
If you looked at the office market, office properties are in terrible shape, but they are actually getting a little bit better as well. Apartments have been in terrible shape for a few years now.
Right.
And I kind of think they're bouncing around the bottom and they'll start to recover soon. But I'm talking about single family homes.
Yeah.
Okay. This chart shows you the percent of loan balances that are what's called seriously delinquent. That means 90 days or more delinquent by the type of loan. So if you look at credit cards, about 11% of people are delinquent on their credit card payments, 90 days or more. That's bad, but it's certainly not the worst it's been. During the Great Recession, it was much, much worse than that. And you can see that on the chart. If you look at student loans, okay? Student loans had some pretty high delinquencies and now they're almost non-existent. You look at mortgages and home equity lines of credit, like there's no delinquency. It's virtually a non-starter. It's like you can't even talk about it. There's so little delinquency going on. But here's one of the big myths you'll hear from the doomers, back to the prior chart. If you look at the foreclosure rate during the COVID era, it was just non-existent. It was like there were 12 people in the United States in foreclosure. I mean, I'm joking, obviously, but it was nothing, right? It was nothing at all. And now it's about, quadruple or 5 times what it was. So all of these doomers that are just lying to people will say, oh, the foreclosure rate is up by 500%. Okay, but compared to what? Compared to nothing. It's down, massively from what it was during the Great Recession, and it's been on a downward slide for basically 15 years.
What is that saying? Like a 500 times 0 is still 0?
Yeah, exactly. 500 times 0 is still 0. That's a great way to put it.
那我在之前讲商业地产那期影片里面呢，我就提到过，地产是一个非常优秀的储存财富的资产。它储存财富的方式呢，不光是在所谓的这个升值角度上来说哈，而是通过合理的这个规划，其中就包括像这个贷款的杠杆啊、抵税啊，还有地产管理这些等等。那产生回报的速度呢，可以不断的超越这个通货膨胀的速度。
Maybe 2021 when I first saw you on the stage. You mentioned something about like the inflation and the housing price. And I remember super clearly because Jason has a very cute dog named Coco. And he takes Coco everywhere except last time in Orlando. I was like, where's Coco? So I kind of want to hear that part again from you. Well, how do you compare goods and services and the real estate inflation trend?
Historically, Joy, everybody has said and everybody knows that real estate is the best hedge against inflation. We've all heard that over and over for many years, and that's a common belief. And it's true. but it's really much better than that. So when people talk about inflation in that way, what they're really looking at is they're just saying the property value either outpaces or at least keeps pace with inflation. So if the inflation rate is 3%, the property will typically historically perform at about 6%. So you're outpacing inflation by 3%. But as they say on those late night infomercials, but wait, there's more. and so part of the more is leverage. So when you leverage that property, it outpaces inflation by even more. Say, for example, you put 20% down and the bank puts 80% of the money into the property. Now you multiply by 5. So remember that 3%, okay? Or let's take the 6% appreciation number I just shared, okay? That means now your leveraged appreciated return is 30%. 30, and inflation is only 3%. Now you're outrunning inflation by 10x. So this is the way investors get much richer than everybody else when they're investing in leveraged real estate. But wait, there's even more. It gets better than that, okay? And I trademarked this strategy many years ago. It's called, and it's a mouthful, it's called inflation-induced debt destruction. IIDD, inflation-induced debt destruction. I know, don't try and say it 10 times fast. It's a tongue twister. But here's what it is, okay? Think about it. If an investor comes to their favorite website today, jasonhartman.com, okay, and say they click on the properties section on my website, and they buy 4 properties today, okay? And say those properties, the 4 of them add up to $1.2 million in value. Okay? And say they borrow $1 million against those properties. So it's $1 million of the bank's money, the lender's money in the deal, $200,000 of your own money. You've got 4 properties now. Okay, so let's just assume for simplicity's sake that it's an interest-only loan, all right? Now, really that's very rare to get an interest-only loan, and most of them are amortized. But just for simplicity, let's assume you're not paying any principal down on the property every month. You're just paying interest only. So today, when you buy those properties, you look at your loan balance, and the 4 properties have a loan balance of $1 million. Okay? Now, over the last 5 years, we've had about 26% inflation, according to the government. Okay? Now, the government numbers, most people would agree, are understated. The calculations they use in the CPI or the Consumer Price Index are manipulated, and they're manipulated lower in most cases. Now, there is a little bit of talk how maybe inflation actually isn't as high as they say it is. And that's a very new idea, like literally yesterday, people started talking about that. But let's just assume the government numbers are accurate for a minute. Most people would say they're massively understated, and inflation is really about double what they tell us. And most of us can feel that when we go to the grocery store, or we buy health insurance.
And the eggs recently, oh my God. Are you in the United States?
Yeah, no, I'm in Colombia right now,
Oh,
and I love eggs.
Lucky you.
Well, they're expensive everywhere, okay? But that's not really all inflation. It's because the Biden administration had all the chickens killed, okay? With bird flu scare. So let's say we've had 26% inflation over 5 years, okay, 5 years. So remember, we got our statement when we bought the properties, we looked and we thought, okay, we owe $1 million. Interest only loan, 5 years from now, we look at the statement and it says we still owe $1 million. But that $1 million has now been debased or devalued through inflation by 26%. So that means inflation literally just paid off $260,000 of your loan balance. It's absolutely incredible. It's incredible. This is called inflation-induced debt destruction. It is the hidden wealth creator that very few people understand or realize is happening. And it happens under the surface, right? It happens in the background. You don't really notice it. Think of it like an iceberg where, you just see a little bit of the iceberg above the water. Most of it is below the water. We all understand that idea. So above the water, when it comes to a real estate investment, we see positive cash flow and we see appreciation. Those are the things we see and realize. But under the water, we have tax benefits, we have leverage, we have inflation-induced debt destruction, we have the tenant paying down the mortgage every month for us. And it's this multi-dimensional, beautiful, beautiful asset class. If you buy stocks, usually it's one-dimensional. Buy low, sell high. If it's a dividend-paying stock, buy low, sell high, get some dividends in between. Only two dimensions, one or two dimensions. Precious metals, one-dimensional. Buy low, sell high. Buy your gold at this price, sell it at that price, okay? One-dimensional, boring. With income property, it's multi-dimensional. And that's why it's the most historically proven asset class in the world.
那说到这个税务问题哈，如果有专业的、合理的税务规划的话呢，避税确实是地产里面非常大的一个优势。那之所以地产是一个很好的避税工具呢，也是因为税法它本来就是政府用来调整市场里面投资方向的一种方式。那在哪个领域避税方式越多，避税力度越高，也就是代表着这个从政府的角度上来说，他们是更希望投资者往这方向去投资金的哈。那税务减免就是一种社会资源分配的途径嘛。
I'm sure a lot of people who are watching my video, they are either already real estate investors or they want to be real estate investors. What kind of, is it a good timing or is it bad timing, or what area do you think it will be a great place for them to be at this moment, or should they wait? Like, what should they do?
Well, look, you've always got to ask yourself, when you have capital to invest, there's always an opportunity cost for things that you don't do, right? And so that's the biggest danger. People trying to time the market almost always miss out. And over the long run, they never perform as well as the investors who are just constantly buying into the market. But, that's human nature to try and time the market and, hack the system, if you will, right? It's a shortcut. But it typically does not work. I mean, there are zillions of studies in every asset class under the sun, whether it be stocks, real estate, cryptocurrency, precious metals, it doesn't matter. Every asset, the market timers lose. They do not win the game. Market timing does not work. And the world's most famous and successful investor arguably is Warren Buffett. And he is not a market timer, okay? He just buys value and holds on to it. In fact, he says his favorite holding period is forever. So, that philosophy, I think, does work. You just buy good properties and you manage them well and you just keep them for the long term and you're going to do well. And history has proven that over and over again. We don't need a study. We all know people, maybe ourselves, but other people that have benefited like that. They just kept buying properties through the ups and the downs, and they didn't agonize about it, and they just knew that that was the place to be. And so, that's my advice, is just buy some single-family homes and keep them.
我们来总结一下哈，今天这一期呢，咱们关注了一下住宅市场的周期。总体来看呢，美国的这个住宅是属于一个短缺的状态。那这个在税法上面也可以侧面去证实一下哈。那整体来看，住宅市场里面的供应量处于有记录以来很低的一个水平。那这个跟疫情期间的低利率也有很大的关系哈。那时候我们也看到了很多人都重新把自己的这个房贷利率调整到了3%左右。那现在利率高了，不到万不得已的时候，这些拥有很低的固定利率贷款的人不太愿意放手自己这个贷款，因为这么低的这个固定利率的贷款，从长期的角度上来看，再把通货膨胀作为考虑因素的话呢，这个30年的非常低的固定利率就成了大家手里面很重要的一个资产。那不过地产这种资产也是地域性非常强的哈，所以作为投资人来说呢，在投资地产的时候，具体案例得具体分析，那不能因为地产整体来说是一个储存财富的资产，咱们就盲目的进行投资。说到底呢，投资的目的是扩展自己人生的选择权嘛，找到合适自己的资产和回报方式才是最重要的。那今天咱就说这么多，别忘了，如果4月份想要在线下跟我聚会的朋友们哈，那麻烦你们填一下这个描述栏里面这个登记表，那希望在线下能够见到大家。